Now we are live.
Okay, start. Can we start now? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Respected seniors, colleagues, and my juniors, I would like to welcome you all in this webinar. Today is a special day as we are celebrating our 31st NESOC Day also with a presentation from an expert where we can learn something. Actually, we had initially planned for a different topic which we had known, but due to some unavoidable circumstances, we had to change the topic. We are sorry for this, but still, this is a very good topic by a great speaker. So, without wasting much more time, I would like to highlight details of today's program. We have two chairpersons with us. We have Professor Hiraman and
Namaste.
Ganesh Tangal sir
Namaste.
as chairpersons. We also have Dr. Chanda Srivastava, who is a General Secretary in NESOG, who will be giving vote of thanks later in the day. We will be shortly joined by our guest speaker, Dr. Amita Jain, who will be talking about evaluation and management of overactive bladder. That will be at 2:30 p.m. And actually, what I wanted to say is like around maybe 5 to 7 years back, I think this topic used to be a topic for urologists only. Like especially in Nepal, when we see such patient who have complaint of overactive bladder, we used to send them to urologists. But now the times have changed with better knowledge and understanding. We gynecologists are also capable of managing and evaluating our own patients. So I think this presentation will certainly boost up for our knowledge and understanding of this overactive bladder. This presentation, this webinar will be around 1 to 1.5 hour maximum. I will be your moderator. If you have any queries or questions, please post it in this QA sections on your screen. I'll be very glad to moderate it. Uh, so can I ask Hiraman to say something about NESOG and its activities on this 31st NESOG Day, ma'am?
Thank you, Sandesh. Uh, thank you, Dipesh for organizing such an important event for us. And today, as Dr. Sandesh has already said, is a very special day for us. Actually, the NESOG Day, 31st NESOG Day, fell 1 week ago on 14th of November. And on 14th of November, every year we celebrate NESOG Day. And previously, we used to celebrate in a very grand way with a very grand gathering. But this time, due to COVID situation, we could not do that. And we are doing this in a virtual way. And this is possible just because of Asian Pharmaceutical and the hard work of Dr. Sandesh and Dr. Ganesh and all the team. Thank you for this. And uh, I can see that about 80 of participants have already joined. And I think our senior NESOG members, colleagues, past presidents must have joined. And namaste to all senior past president and colleagues and the junior colleagues also. Here, I want to say a few words on NESOG, especially for our young members who may not be knowing what NESOG is all about, what we do. And I just want to give a glimpse of NESOG in some slides. So again, wishing all of you a happy 31st NESOG Day. So all of us know that it is a professional organization of obstetricians and gynecologists of Nepal. It was established in November 14, 1989. It was way back in 1989. It was established with the effort of our very dynamic seniors. Uh, and it is officially registered with District Administration Office of Kathmandu, Social Welfare Council, and it is also certified as non-profit organization. And currently we have 568 life members, and it is increasing day by day. Our vision is as a leader working to achieve the highest possible standard of reproductive health, which is accessible and equally distributed to all Nepalese women. And these are our past presidents of NESOG, uh, who had contributed a lot in development of NESOG to this level. And all of them had special uh, leadership, and all of them are source of inspiration for us. Our mission is to improve the health of all Nepalese women and the newborn, and to continuously work towards improving the practice of obstetrics and gynecology by providing leadership, guidance, and effective collaboration. And it also aims to empower NESOG members by education, research, and training opportunities. And we follow certain values. We believe in participatory leadership. We respect each other. Our work is transparent, and we value creativity and innovation. We believe in professionalism, integrity, equity, and accountability. These are our values. And NESOG is our pride. Whenever we say NESOG, we feel something very emotional and passionate about NESOG. And this is the picture of last year's NESOG celebration, where we can see our founder member, Madam Dr. Dibeshri Malla, Professor Ashma Rana, Dr. Beena Srivastav, Dr. Sudha Sharma, and Dr. Pramila ma'am, who are all past presidents of NESOG. And we collaborate with the government of Nepal, Ministry of Health and Population, Family Welfare Division, in carrying out the projects related to women's health. And we also do partnership with UNFPA, WHO, UNICEF, and much more. Also INGOs, NGOs, and other national professional associations and societies. And we have affiliations with international and regional professional federations like FIGO, FOG, SAFOG, RCOG. Areas of activities of NESOG are focused on maternal and perinatal health, adolescent sexual and reproductive health, family planning and contraceptive technology, colposcopy, oncology, subfertility, minimally invasive surgery, urogynecology. We do advocacy on safe motherhood, legalization of abortion, safe abortion service, tax sharing, and tax shifting. We already had conducted various trainings on adolescent health, SBA, CTS, also training, CAP training, ICOE with FOG, and MPDSR trainings with WHO. And we have conducted lots of research, among which near miss, MPDSR, family planning, and much more are there. This is a picture of 2014 NESO conference. And our key activities are to conduct annual conferences every year. 1 year we conduct national conference, and another year international conference. We conduct workshops, symposium on reproductive health, trainings, research, regular CME, and we have publications of NGOG, Nepal Journal of OBGYN, every 6 monthly, regular newsletters, and we publish guidelines. This year we have published COVID guidelines of NESOG, advocacy for reproductive health issues, and task shifting and sharing with paramedics. These are our publications, journal and NESOG newsletters. And we yeah, for encouragement of our members and to honor our senior members, we have established certain awards like Soma Award, Nisog Award for best paper presentations, a Young Gynecologist Award with EOFOG, Senior Gynecologist Award to our senior gynecologist, and Tilak Bhawan Medal for best paper in published in journal. And there are orations which are carried out during conferences like Nisog oration, Junthapa oration, Hirananda Vaidya oration, Chudananda Vaidya oration. And we have lots of challenges. This year, the challenges have been added by this COVID-19 pandemic, which is worldwide and still going on. And due to this, we have not been able to carry out our regular activities also, but still, it does not stop us from learning and carrying out the learning activities like we are doing today, and changes in government system, federal system, and policy uh, changing policies of government are also challenges for us. And always there is financial constraints. And the way forward, we will have more collaborations with national and international organizations for more activities. And we will, in coming years, we'll have more effective communication with our dynamic members. And there'll be, we will explore for more opportunities on research, training, and education for our members. And this is the current executive committee, which is 16th one. We have recently completed our election for 17th executive committee, and I want to congratulate all of the elected 17th executive committee members on this day. So once again, happy 31st Nesog Day. Long live Nesog. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for sharing the activities of NESOG in this day. I think we still have some time before our presentation really starts. So I think we can have a small lucky draw organized by Dipesh ji. Ma'am, would you like to say something?
Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
I'll say a little 2 lines to
Yes,
all
ma'am.
our members. Respected executives, dear organizing committee member, which you could not do the conference 2020 April, and same organizing committee will be working for 2021 conference. Hopefully, we will be able to do. By the way, if it is virtual, even that is conference or face to face, it could happen to face to face. That will be excellent. So we are planning to do next conference 2021 in April. Date will be finalized very soon. One thing is that, as Dr. Hira said, NESO completed its election very successfully, very modern way, e-election, which was very, very effective, and percentage was also, it was very good, maximum participation of our members. So I take this opportunity to thank each and every one of executive members, organizing committee members, and election commissioners, 2 election commissioners who could give 100% of their performance, and all the members who could vote for me and who could not vote for me. I'll thanks from my bottom of heart. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Dipesh ji, now it's you. It's on you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sandesh. Thank you very much, all the members of NESOG. Thank you very much, doctors, for providing us the opportunity to be a part of the CME. And we are always with NESOG for all kind of educating CME program or education. And right now we are all missing, rightly ma'am said, like we are missing NESOG day, and as NESOG conference also, we always miss you meeting in a one place. So we want to create just a environment like it's a conference. So we have, as usual, we do the lucky draw in our conference. So today also we have a lucky draw for those who have registered already, and we're almost 200 members registered over here. And so I would like, with your permission, I'd like to do the lucky draw. So this is digital lucky draw. Let's start it. Okay, the first one. Let's see, clean back. Honda, IROX. Okay, IROX. The first prize is for IROX. So the names are, let's see, check. Oh, this is Dr. Bisal
Vishal
Khania.
Khania.
Vishal Khania, 986005257. Congratulations, Dr. Vishal Khania. Our team will contact you, or you can raise your hand and we'll see you. So this is the first prize. Let's see another one. That. And the second prize is of it's clean backed. Okay. Our clindamycin clean back. Okay. And it is and the winner, okay. Nam very fast घुमिरहेछ. So your system ले नै घुमाउने हो हामीले हात खाली. Okay. And it's Dr. Sunita Serai, 98511349194. Congratulations, Dr. Sunita Serai. So our team will contact you soon. Congratulations once again. So Sandesh Raksab, तपाईहरु कसैले चिन्नु भएको डाक्टर साहबहरु आफ्नो टिमको यहाँको त
होइन सबै यङ मेम्बर्सहरूलाई
new generation le. So then the last prize. So and another prize. All prizes are same, right? There are different product ko bhako hunale. So we got the third prize. Last prize this is the third. And third prize is definitely it's of Onda Citron 4 mg tablet syrup from Asian Onda.
हाम्रो त नामै देखिएन नि दिपेशजी.
Oh, त्यो त रोलमा म्यामले it's Bhakta Dr. Bhakta Bhusal Rao 9847. Dr. Bhakta is from Butol, I think.
Butol, yeah, he is from Butol.
Congratulations, Dr. Bhakta. Our team will contact you soon, very soon.
Oh, thank you
with
so
the
much.
prize, eh? With the prize.
Yes.
So all together, we have the three winners. So actually review ma prize winners haruko gardinchu. Daily winners.
I think we have a guest speaker with us now.
Three winners: IROX ko Dr. Vishal Khania, Cleanback ko Dr. Sunita Serai, and Onda ko Dr. Bhakta Rao. Congratulations all. Thank you very much. Thank
you so
you.
much. Thanks so much.
So thank you.
That was a great honor. Thank you, Dipeshji.
Thank
now
you.
It's my great pleasure to welcome our speaker, Dr. Amita Jain, as a speaker for today's webinar. Thank you for accepting our invitation, ma'am. Now I would like to ask Professor Ganesh sir to introduce our speaker and to start the presentation without much delay. Sir.
Thank you, Dr. Sandesh. I think Dr. Amita Jain doesn't need any formal introduction. Good afternoon and namaste everyone. It is indeed a great pleasure to welcome you all in this mega event of NESOG. On behalf of NESOG, I would like to expand a warm welcome to Dr. Amita Jain and you all in this amazing webinar on this auspicious NESOG Day. She is a towering figure and a stalwart in the field of urogynecology in South Asia. Dr. Amita Jain holds MBBS, MS Obs Gynae, fellow in urogynecology from Australia, is a subspecialty trained certified urogynecologist practicing in Medanta, India. She is a senior consultant urogynecologist at Medanta Institute of Urology and Robotic Surgery. At present, she is the General Secretary of South Asian Federation of Urogynecology and Executive Committee member of Global Interstitial Cystitis and Bladder Pain Syndrome Society. Dr. Amita Jain has been the chairperson of Urogynecology Subcommittee of Association of Obstetrician and Gynecologists of Delhi. Besides this, Dr. Jain has written and published extensively on this upcoming field of urogynecology, and she has published several publications in many national and international journals to her credit. She has received many prestigious awards, including many travel awards and bursaries. She has also organized or been invited to many educational CMEs and workshops and fellowship programs and other educational activities. She is also an international faculty in National Academy of Medical Sciences Urogyne Fellowship Program of Nepal, with a vast experience of having performed all named surgeries in urogynecological field. She specializes in minimally invasive surgery for urinary incontinence, genital prolapse, and fistulas. Dr. Join travels all over the world demonstrating her minimally invasive surgeries and is a true friend of Nepal. She is an excellent orator and has been to Nepal several times teaching us. She is a great teacher. So, madam, now the show is yours, and please enlighten us with your vast experience and wisdom. She is going to talk on evaluation and management of overactive bladder. So, over to you, madam. Please proceed further. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ganesh, for this nice introduction. I need to share my screen.
Yes, madam, I'll stop sharing
Give
and
me
you
that
can,
permission.
yeah,
And,
you can share the screen.
Yes. So, okay. So I hope now you are able to see my screen.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So first, at the outset, I'm very thankful to Dr. Ganesh. Though it was a very last time invitation for me, and I'm trying to manage the things because the topic which has been given, overactive bladder, is actually very interesting. So I will try my best to to justify with the topic through my next slides. And the overactive bladder, as we all know that the definition as given by IUGA and International Continence Society, that it involves urinary urgency, usually accompanied by frequency and nocturia, with or without urge incontinence in the absence of urinary tract infection or other obvious pathology. That means there are certain subset of symptoms, and also it is the disease diagnosis of exclusions once you are excluding other causes for the same symptoms. What could be the spectrum of symptoms? Yes, these are the spectrum of symptoms which are required, and out of all these, the urgency is the most important. That is sudden compelling desire to pass urine, which is difficult to differ. Along with it can be frequency as well, like 8 or more visits to the toilet during waking hours. That is, once the patient is not sleeping, then 8 visits are normal. But if it is more than that, then it is named as high frequency. Same with the nocturia. If patient is getting up from the sleep, not because of any other thing, but because of the desire or need to void urgently, then probably it is nocturia. And here is important is that there shouldn't be no other factor like disturbance of sleep because of any other thing, anxiety or something like that. The patient is not able to sleep, or there is pain or something else. Urge incontinence, yes, if it is associated with the leakage, then it is called urge incontinence. So all these, or at least urgency with or without presence of frequency nocturia or urge incontinence. Regarding prevalence, yes, we Asian countries don't have our own data very nicely. We are not collecting our data. Like if we see the data from abroad, then we can see that it is gradually increasing with age, both in men and women. You can see that initially in early age, it could be pretty common in men than women, but later on in as you know, the older would be the person, it would be more prevalent in ladies, and the prevalence is also very high. Yes, it can be divided into dry or wet depending on the presence of incontinence. And it has been seen that a significant 37% of total cases of overactive bladder may be associated with the incontinence. If we think that it's not very common thing, then you can see this slide. It is again data from US, and it is way back in 1999. So maybe the, now OAB would be on the higher side of this list. You can see it is pretty much more common than asthma, diabetes, osteoporosis. So we are going for all these diseases because we think that these diseases are life-threatening, but overactive bladder is also pretty common and can have significant side effects. It's a hidden condition. We all know that patients are actually not coming to doctors directly. They think that they can manage, and usually they are self-managing by doing some kind of strategies. And usually 2/3 of the patients are waiting for at least 2 years to seek for any help, and nearly 80% are not getting examined as well. Why? Because there are many misconceptions which are regarding this disease among common persons, like it is a part of normal aging or everyday life. It's not severe or frequent enough to treat because it's not life threatening. There are stigmas associated, like it's too embarrassing to discuss, and probably they think that there is no permanent treatment for this condition. There is no use of going doctors, and they might ask for some kind of surgical or something hi-fi. They can bear the thing without getting those invasive treatments. So these are the barriers to the treatment, and that's why we are having a huge burden of urinary incontinence. WHO has already recognized it as international health concern way back in 1998. And what happens? We all know in our clinic, patients are not coming directly for this problem. Instead, they are coming with associated morbidity, recurrent infections, recurrent fungal infections, cellulitis. This is one of the patient in my OPD. You can see, look at her vulva. So much excoriation is there. There could be even falls or fractures, especially in the elderly age group, once they are not able to reach up to the toilet in time. There could be sleep disturbance, many other psychological factors as well, which can affect their work life, their personal sexual life. So there could be depression as well. So what is our duty? We should actively screen and diagnose overactive bladder, and probably we are required to ask in our busy OPD the leading question to the ladies, especially in the elderly age group: do you have bladder problems that are troublesome, or do you ever leak? That's very important, because as we have discussed in earlier slides, that patients are not coming with the problem directly. They are coming with the associated morbidities. So please ask this leading question whenever you find suspicion of this disease. And then your next thing, if the answer is yes, assess history, symptoms, and you might require some kind of examination and investigation. So starting with the history taking, type of incontinence and timing and severity you have to confirm by asking detailed history of their incontinence, or if it is not incontinence, whatever the bladder problem she is facing with. There should be also a history of associated bowel symptoms as well, because there could be constipation. And mind you, because if there is one part of your pelvic organ is loaded, then probably other part won't be able to function adequately. So it's always said that there shouldn't be any constipation whenever you are treating any kind of bladder problem. Obstetrical and gynecological history is also important. We always take it routinely because it can give us insight of the etiology of incontinence. Also relevant comorbidities, including cognitive impairment. Here it is very important, because later on we will learn, once we are choosing medication for these patients, especially the elderly ones, then we must know, because some medications can affect or impair cognitive function of a patient. Medication, obviously we know that there is also some effect of some medications on bladder function. So we must rule out any recent prescription of medication which can affect bladder function. We all know it's very easy through just history on symptom assessment to differentiate between two common incontinence, that is urgent continence and stress incontinence. With overactive bladder, usually urgency, frequency are the predominant symptoms which are absent in stress incontinence. Leakage during physical activity, while on the other hand is usually present in stress incontinence, not overactive bladder. Amount of urinary leakage is also important. Usually it is small in stress incontinence, but In overactive bladder, it could be large. Ability to reach the toilet in time following an urge to void, often not. You can specifically ask this thing. If it is there, then probably it could be stress incontinence. Waking to pass urine at night would usually be with overactive bladder. So these are the symptoms how you can differentiate between two. But still, sometimes patient can give history of both the symptoms because there could be mixed incontinence as well. So there is a spectrum of overactive bladder which can be present with stress incontinence as well. There are some validated urinary incontinence questionnaire which can help even especially to decide the impact on quality of life, but still it has been seen that it is not having any influence on outcome, and usually these are used for research purpose. The best tool to understand what is happening with the patient is voiding diary. So this is an example of voiding diary. You can see you should ask a patient to maintain a diary of at least 3 to 7 days, and it should involve both working and non-working days, especially if a patient is professional, and it gives a very nice idea of the whole day bladder function. You can understand what is the patient fluid intake, which can impact the bladder frequency and urgency. The voided volume, especially the early first morning voided volume, will tell you the total capacity, the largest one. Frequency, mean time interval between voids, leaking episodes, everything can be noted down in detail, and you can it will help you in making a diagnosis. So I am having one website. You can note down this website, www.urogynecologist.india.in, where I have put my video how just to counsel patients that how to maintain the bladder diary. And I'm telling you, it's the best investigation tool if you are applying this for your patients to understand the type of incontinence, even to keep an eye of whatever treatment and management you are giving to the patient, whether it is working or not. See this example of voiding diary. Here you can see this patient was initially came to me with a problem of incontinence and seems to be a patient of urgent incontinence, but we found that she is not able to evacuate her bladder adequately, and then on CIC we can see that there is a large amount of urine which is left after passing urine, and that's why there could be you can see high frequency, everything is there. It was because she was actually suffering with overflow incontinence. Now, the next screening should be to rule out other causes, which was in the definition that you should rule out the causes for these symptoms other than overactive bladder. So there could be a local pathology. There could be any thing which can irritate the bladder. It could be infection. It could be interstitial cystitis, bladder pain syndrome, presence of stones, tumor, outlet obstruction. There could be, the recent start of medication history, diuretic, antidepressant, antihypertensive, hypnotics and sedatives, narcotics and analgesics. And you must understand if it is the cause of their recent symptoms, you can ask the relevant specialist to change the medication if possible. Metabolic factors could be there, like diabetes and polydipsia. We all know diabetes have the effects on nerves, and sometimes it can decrease the sensation of the bladder, as well as it can cause, it can decrease the contractility of the bladder. So there could be a complicated situation, you must know. Other factors could be pregnancy or psychological issues. So now our duty to rule out all these things by first starting with the physical examination. You must see what is the mental status of the patient. Obesity can increase the incontinence of his episodes. If there would be any kind of restriction in mobility, like patient has just got a knee transplant or something like that, that could be a functional problem which can accentuate the existing incontinence problem. Cognitive function should be seen, dexterity and edema, everything. Like edema can tell that, there could be upper tract involvement. You must understand there could be some neurological problem as well. Abdominal examination, yes, you can see whether there is any enlarged bladder or pelvic mass, because enlarged bladder can be indicative of retention of urine or overflow incontinence, and pelvic mass, if it is present, probably any medication for overactive bladder will not be there because it is compressing over the pressing over the bladder. Pelvic and rectal examination is very important. We all know as a gynecologist that we can handle many kind of prolapse, but what impact these prolapse have on the bladder? It's not only the cystocele, but sometimes even a prolapse is huge. It is involving other compartments. It can have the pressure effects on bladder as well and cause overactive bladder. There could everything, whatever is coming out of the vagina is not always prolapse. It could be urethral diverticulum. It could be atrophic changes which can cause the problems, which can accentuate the problems. It could be presence of infection, and you should also rule out any vulvitis or anything excoriation. It could be indicative of active urinary incontinence, and because of the moisture, because of the wetness, probably patient can have super infections, and because of that these conditions could be there. Of course, neurological examination is very, very important. And if you are not very well versed with the kind of dermatomes and how to examine these dermatomes, especially the pathways from the S1 to S4 should be assessed through sensations like perineal sensation, bulbocavernous reflexes, rectal sphincter tone, ability to contract the anal sphincter. But if you are not very well versed, please, if there is any suspicion of neurological involvement, send these patients to your colleague neurologist. Then a cough stress test, which is pretty common, and we always think that it is for the stress incontinence, but there is an important message which I want to give here, that just see here on coughing. Yes, so if the leakage is not immediate, it is few seconds after the coughing, then it could be cough-induced overactive bladder or urgent continence. So we have to be very, very cautious in understanding the what is the finding and what should be the interpretation of any test. Okay. Now, investigation. Yes, we know the preliminary investigation for any kind of incontinence to rule out infection, and urinalysis not only rule out infection, but also other things like if there would be blood, then probably you have to understand if it is not infection, it could be malignancy and probably require cystoscopy and other CT or something like that. Pyuria, yes, infection, bacteria infection, but presence of high amount of glucose can be indicative of not well controlled diabetes, and you need to ask these patients to go to endocrinologist as well. And presence of protein in absence of other things could be indicative of even renal impairment. Asymptomatic bacteria have little influence in a healthy person, but if a patient is pregnant or if a patient is having a catheter because of any cause, then probably you have to actively treat this as well. Yes, post-void residue. Not in each and every patient you have to assess this post-void residue. Though usually we do it by ultrasound. Catheterization is better because gives accurate diagnosis, but it's invasive. So ultrasound is common to assess the PVR, and usually if it is less than 50 ml, just forget, there is no high PVR. We have found many ultrasonologists. I hope that you also are facing the same problem that many radiologists are writing in their report in ultrasound, significant post-void residue even at the value of 30 or 40 ml. So the importance is here that you must ask for the pre-void also, because it should be around 10%, the PVR should be around 10% of the voided volume. Then it is important if it is more than 10%, otherwise PVR of any value is, you can't, even if it is less than 200 ml is insignificant. Now, what are the indications where you have to assess post-void residue? Yes, if patient is giving a history which is indicative of that, yeah, it could be incomplete emptying, like in patients of diabetes and patients of prolapse, or there is a past history of retention or recent failure of your initial treatment, or patient had a recent surgery, pelvic surgery, or any incontinence surgery. This test, the PET testing is actually now obsolete, because there are many problems with this test. There could be a false negative test because of the drying, or false positive because of the perspiration and vaginal discharge. So nowadays we don't use this test and we don't require this test. So now, to just summarize, we can make a presumptive diagnosis of overactive bladder just by history examination and urinalysis, PVR only if indicated. And by this time, we can start a treatment to the patient. Especially the non-invasive treatment can be started by after this initial workup. But you should understand the need of individual patient, and your management must be tailored according to this need. Like, for example, there are some potentially treatable causes which you can address. Like, if a patient is elderly group, and if there is a presence of delirium or confusion in these patients, then probably the good idea would be to ask for timed or scheduled voiding to avoid incontinence or urgent continence. You must understand what is our largest capacity by voiding diary, and then you can ask that at what time interval they should be asked to void before they are reaching to the condition to leak their urine. Infection, obviously, it should be treated. Atopic vaginitis, which is pretty common in elderly generation, it's a good idea to start hormonal cream beforehand. Then only you will get a good response of overactive bladder. I already discussed this thing that yes, if possible, change that pharmacological agent which is causing aggravation of incontinence problem if possible. Psychological factors should be assessed, and you can send the patients to psychiatrists. Yes, on bladder diary itself, you can see if a patient is having a habit of excessive intake, then probably it could be the reason for excessive urine output, and you can manage that as well. As restricted mobility, I already discussed, and stool infection, I told you that what is the importance of treating constipation. So we have to start with the first line management, that is behavioral treatment. And it, as we have already discussed, the part of this is self-management techniques. That's mean fluid management. Very important. The excessive intake is not good, as well as the less intake is also not good. It should be at least 2 to 2.5 liters a day, depending if patient is not having any insensible loss. But the more important thing is that it should be in distributed form. If it is too less, and if a patient is taking 1 liter in morning and rest of the days she is not taking much, then it's not going to help, because the concentrated urine is again irritable for the bladder and can accentuate the problem. So fluid management is very important. You can reduce all those bladder irritants by looking at the bladder diary, that if patient is having high intake of these bladder irritants like caffeine, alcohol, then you can ask them to reduce this. Patient should quit smoking. Weight loss strategy is also important, because it decreases the abdominal pressure, and it can decrease the severity of incontinence. Treating constipation. The importance of timed or scheduled voiding, I already explained. Urge control techniques, these are very, very important. And actually, we think that pelvic floor exercise or pelvic floor contraction only works for distress incontinence, but it is not so. Actually, if you are able to actively contract your pelvic floor muscle, you can reflexively inhibit unwanted bladder contraction. So you must understand that patient this is your chance to make them understand what is their pelvic floor by just keeping 2 fingers. They must realize, if they are able to lift your finger, then probably they know what is their pelvic floor muscle. If not, then you can take help of these biofeedback like vaginal cones or periometer. Or if at all they are not able to contract their pelvic floor muscles, then probably electrical stimulation can also help. But this actually pelvic floor contraction is a very, very good part of urge control techniques. Other things could be mental distraction, perineal pressure. Many things are there which are described to control over urge. And there should be at least 6 weeks trial of all these things before thinking that we have to go for higher treatments. It depends. If severity is high, then probably you can start pharmacotherapy in combination These are the medications. We know that all the antimuscarinics which are described so far are having almost equal efficacy. Nowadays, we don't recommend that cycloamine and flavoxate. This is dosing, and as I told you that efficacy wise, they are not, no particular antimuscarinic agent is superior to another. But how to decide which one has to be taken? It depends on their spectrum of side effects. Especially, it has been seen in elderly patients. We choose derifenacin or trospium because it doesn't crosses the blood-brain barrier and having least cognitive side effects. Regarding dose, you can see that usually there are two doses. One is the minimum dose, which is like for oxybutynin, it is 5 milligram. Other is 10 milligram. Usually we prefer the extended release preparation because it will give a better control on the bladder symptoms. Tolterodine dose is 2 mg and 4 mg, derifenacin 7.5 and 15 mg, trospium 20 mg, it's coming only with the extended release dose, and solifenacin 5 or 10 mg. My personal choice is solifenacin because it's having a very good efficacy, its T-half is well maintained, and also it's having the least side effects. Side effects, yes, it could be on the brain as I have described. It could be on salivary glands as well. It will cause dry mouth. It can affect on intestine. Then it can cause constipation, and it can have other multiple of the side effects depending on the presence of muscarinic receptors in different parts of our body. So it should never be given if a patient is pregnant, breastfeeding, drug hypersensitivity history is there, patient is having uncontrolled narrow angle glaucoma, patient is having history of urinary retention, paralytic ileus, or genital, the gastrointestinal obstruction. Another medication which is now available in India, I'm sure it would be available in Nepal as well. Actually, now this after introduction of this molecule, we now have a second line treatment as well, and sometimes we can utilize it as a first line treatment because in those patients who cannot tolerate anti-muscarinic or where it is contraindicated, this is a second choice. The beauty of this medication is that it causes induction of relaxation. It works at the by inducing the relaxation. That's why while anticholinergic works by induction of contraction, inhibition of contraction. So that's why it might have effect on the voiding phase, and there could be a problem with the voiding, but it will not affect the voiding because it is inducing the relaxation. And that's why it can be given in those patients as well where there could be a presence of voiding dysfunction, like in men. If it is the bladder, the BPH, that is benign prostate hypertrophy is there, this is the medication of choice. So we can give in those patients where there is associated voiding dysfunction. The recommended dose is 50 milligram per day for an adult. But if there is a presence of renal or hepatic impairment, the dose should be reduced to 25 mg. It is also associated with some of the side effects, like if a patient is having active heart disease, then probably it's not a good choice of medication, especially tachycardia, atrial fibrillation, and also you should be very cautious in presence of gamma glutamyl transpeptidase or aspartate aminotransferase or alanine aminotransferase enzymes are high. In those patients, you should be cautious. Desmopressin is also a medication which can be given in those patients which are particularly suffering with nocturia, but it should never be given in those where cystic fibrosis is there, or it should be avoided in patients with age more than 65 years, especially if there is a cardiovascular disease or hypertension. Now, you must be wondering that how to choose a medication in a particular patient. So, as I explained to you that you have to choose between mirabegron or any anticholinergic just by looking at the side effect profile, because the efficacy wise both of the medications are good. But yes, the mirabegron takes longer time to start having full action because its T-half is high, pretty longer. It takes around 1 week to 10 days to have full effect. So if you want, result which should be in time, then probably you can start with the anticholinergic. If both of these medications are not working at all, then you can combine these two medications to see the effect. But if suppose you have prescribed anticholinergics and the response is good but not complete, it's more than 50% response but it's not 100%, then you can increase the dose of anticholinergic. In this way, you can choose between these medications. Always choose extended release formulation. The side effect profile should always be considered before prescribing medication. Yes, there are few side effects like constipation, which can be easily dealt by by using some laxatives or stool softeners. So don't think that if there is side effect, then you have to stop the medication. You have to also see that whether the efficacy or the result of treating OAB is good, then probably you can deal the side effects by adding other medications, by treating the side effect and complication. In this way, you can improve the compliance. So in India, I was the part of guidelines which were made by Urological Society of India, and even that society has given the same recommendation, like any antimuscarinic can be used. It is a strong evidence that yes, every antimuscarinic having almost same efficacy. Even the mirabegron can be used as a first-line medication, and combination, of course, combination of both the things, mirabegron and antimuscarinic, has more efficacy than using either drug alone. But you must be wondering, if it doesn't have any effect or effect is quite less than 20%, then what should be the next step? First, we must think whether we are accurate in our diagnosis. Sometimes what happens, once you are treating the overactive bladder, and if the patient is having mixed incontinence, the other part, SUI, which was hidden, can be now dominant, and the patient now can present with active stress urinary incontinence, and then probably you have to treat that component as well. You have to rule out nocturnal polyuria as well. Again, for this, the bladder diary will help if the production of urine is more than 20% in younger age group and more than 33% in elderly age group of total urine output. If it is more than 20% in night, the production is more than 20%, then probably it could be nocturnal polyuria. So you have to see carefully the bladder diary, and you have to see the night frequency and nocturnal production of urine. So this is indicative of a very particular situation. It could be because of, you have to see whether patient is obese or patient is having sleep apnea, because in these patients, their intrathoracic pressure is quite high. Because of that, there could be compression of the heart, and there could be production of some kind of hormones which is causing nocturnal polyuria. So these patients should be sent to the obesity management team, and should be treated for their cardiovascular problem beforehand. And you shouldn't actively treat overactive bladder, just overactive bladder in these patients. Polydipsia again is indicative of that probably the sugar levels of patients are not well controlled, and that's why they are having high urge for drinking, and because of that probably. So in this, again, the bladder diary will help, because there would be high intake of fluid in these patients. ICBPS, this is also a very common condition. Now we have actually started a kind of society, because we are seeing a lot patients of this condition which are coming to us, and the only differentiating feature with overactive bladder is presence of pain. Here patient will tell that yes, they are getting up in night because of discomfort and pain, not because of the fear of leakage or urgency. So this is a differentiating feature between 2 entity. Urodynamics, yes. Probably these are the patients when you are not confirmed of the diagnosis, you have given your initial treatment which is failed, then these patients should undergo urodynamic study. I know for many of us, urodynamic is not our choice of investigation because we are not very well versed with urodynamics. So just to tell you, just to brief you, in urodynamics, it's very easy to learn. And if you want, we are doing dedicated classes on urodynamics, and you can come over to us and you can learn in 2-3 days time. We can make you understand how to read these tracings. Here you can see this is the pressure vesicle, which is total pressure of the bladder. It also includes the bladder abdominal pressure. So we have to measure the abdominal pressure separately by putting a tube inside the rectum. And once we are subtracting this bladder abdominal pressure from the total pressure, we are getting the actual detrusor pressure. So now you can see, normally this should not rise during the filling phase. Bladder is like a balloon. Bladder should extend and the pressure should be maintained below 10 centimeter of water during the filling phase. But if a bladder is having unwanted contraction, which is diagnostic of overactive bladder, then you can see these spikes. So this is showing the unwanted bladder contraction, and you can see with this there is an incontinence as well. So this is a patient of urgent continence, and here it is not the normal voiding. You can see that the urge or the bladder contraction was so strong that it was causing. हेलो हेलो कौन बोल रहे हैं आप प्लीज कॉल मत करिए दोबारा सॉरी and still I'm getting some phone calls. I'm really sorry for interrupting in between. So that is not a normal voiding, because it is actually the terminal detrusor overactivity. Because of that, patient is given the command to void. Otherwise, probably if it would have not been there, patient would have been able to fill more amount of the fluid, and probably the maximum cystometric capacity, which is quite low here, 180 ml, is not her actual capacity. It could be higher. It would have been higher if we would have controlled this overactive bladder. But suppose we are not finding these high pressures, it's just the pressures are normal, but there is high sensations. The first desire at 53 ml or something is there. Then what you should do next? Probably the answer for these patients is cystoscopy. Because if you are finding hypersensitivity, you must see inside the bladder. And you must learn, every gynecologist must learn how to do a cystoscopy. Sorry. And I don't know my... Sorry, just a minute. I need to see. My presentation stopped. Just a minute. Give me 1 minute.
Sure, ma'am. No problem.
I'm not sure whether my internet is okay and you are able to see everything.
I think it's okay. Internet is okay. We can hear you.
Okay,
Because I'm using my mobile internet for hotspot. Just a minute. Just a minute. So now I think it's okay.
It's okay.
Yes,
So you
ma'am.
can see inside the bladder, and by putting inside, you can see these kinds of ulcers. If these are present, it could be indicative of interstitial cystitis. You can see how the mucosal tears and this waterfall sign, which is very, very pathognomic of interstitial cystitis, could be there. And probably that could be the reason of high frequency in urgency. And these patients sometimes will give a clear cut history of associated pain, but sometimes they will just present with discomfort or unusual sensations. Imaging, yes, you can take a help of imaging whenever you are suspecting, like in neurogenic patients, there could be very high pressures, detrusor pressures, and there could be upper tract involvement. You can see you need to neurologically evaluate those patients where there is a positive neurological history, then probably spine imaging will help. Other things actually like bladder wall thickness and all these things are not recommended to, are not having any a clear-cut association with overactive bladder. Now, a few words about the second line treatment of refractory overactive bladder, that is botulinum toxin injection into the into the detrusor muscle. So here you can see the video. So what we usually do, the recommended dose right now for the idiopathic detrusor overactivity is 100 units. So what we do that we dilute it 100 units into 20 ml of normal saline, and then we inject 1 ml at 20 sites. So it would be 5 units at each site. In this way, you can actually distribute the injections. So it even we can involve the Trigone. Nowadays, it is said there is no higher chances of getting vesico-ureteric reflux on putting the injection at Trigone as well. And you should try to distribute evenly in all the walls. There could be a small risk of UTI or increased PVR. There is 2 to 3% risk of high PVR in these patients. So you have to make them understand that they might need to self-catheterize for a while, not lifelong. Once the effect of this botulinum toxin will go off, then probably they won't require this thing. Usually the effect of these hormones come in, full effect comes in 1 week time to 10 days, and it remains at least for 3 months. But it has been seen that sometimes it works to 6 months to 1 year as well. But obviously, if the effect is going off, then you have to repeat the injection. We usually recommend that interval between 2 injections should be 6 months. Why? Because it has been seen that if you are keeping the interval too less, there could be chances of developing resistance, because there could be formation of antibodies against these toxins. Sacral nerve stimulation, these are the very, only very highly skilled persons who have got training of doing these kind of procedures can do this thing. And it's very, very expensive. That's why in India, it's not very popular. And obviously, it's not always giving 100% result. There are chances that the lead can displaced from its side, and even the battery has to be changed. So these are the probably reasons why it is not very popular. Yes, one thing, posterior tibial nerve stimulation, this can be utilized because you can purchase it online. Many of our physicians are having this thing with them, and here you can see how you can use this posterior tibial nerve stimulation. But it has been seen that it is only effective once you are using. Once you are stopping, the effect will not go off. So it is usually given to those patients who are not doing well with conservative management and pharmacotherapy, and who are not ready to have botulinum toxin or sacral nerve stimulation. The transcutaneous one should never be used. These are not recommended. And last slide is cystoplasty and urinary diversion. Just to state, these are the things which are done by urologists. You have to refer patients to them. You must know there is that's Actually, these are the last modalities. It should only be done if there is everything has failed and patient is having very, very poor quality of life. And I have seen very few cases, 1 or 2 cases of overactive bladder, which actually require these kinds of things. And usually these cases are having something in background of neurological origin. So I don't think so it's a very good idea for going for these surgeries for those patients who can easily be managed by the initial treatment. And these patients require lifelong follow-up because there is a risk of malignancy. I think this would be a better thing, containment, if a patient wants to, is very frail and wants to delay definite treatment. It could be absorbent pads. There is from Cooks, this is a kind of catheter which is having kind of switch, and by just if they don't have to use this bag all the time while they are attending some function. They just have to retain that urine, and once they want to evacuate, then they just have to open it by pressing this switch. So these kinds of devices are available which can help these patients as containment. Thank you so much. I think I tried my best to justify this topic, and I'm ready to take the questions. Yes.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think you have shared every aspect of OAB in great detail. I think we cannot get everything in such detail and in such a simple language in any other book. Thank you so much, ma'am. I think I'll just find out if there's any question. I just wanted to ask if there is any difference in the management while treating young patients and the older ones.
Yes, that's very, very important question you ask, because there are certain differences in elderly age group. One thing which I already mentioned, the cognitive impairment, which is pretty common in elderly age group. And it's not only about the side effect of anticholinergic, it's also about if there is associated delirium or forgetfulness, then probably you have to stress upon behavioral management mode in these patients. Second thing is presence of comorbidities in these patients. So there are all the things like diabetes, hypertension, all these ailments are pretty common in the elderly age group, and there is many medications which are prescribed to these patients. So you have to be very well versed with the interaction of the medications before prescribing these patients. So it should be very cautious for the elderly patient and their groups. There shouldn't be an interaction. There shouldn't be a side effect. Even the constipation is pretty common. So you have to treat, that was my first line of management, that you have to treat the patient as an individual, on individual basis, seeking all, looking on all comorbidities and everything, just not overactive bladder. Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Well, one more question from Baba. How does botulinum toxin work?
Okay, the botulinum toxin, actually it's a neuromuscular blockade. We will say that it acts on the neuromuscular junction on the muscarinic receptors. So it blocks the receptor in the way that it will not work till the newer axons are regenerating and will have development of new neuromuscular junction. That's why its effect is at least for 3 months. But it has also been seen that it has effect on sensation as well, because it's inhibiting the sensory receptors as well. So that's why it has a role in those diseases as well, where we need to decrease the sensation, like in interstitial cystitis or bladder pain syndrome.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. I think we had a very nice presentation here. I think we will be having another presentation in a near future with you. I think Dr. Ganesh has already been has been doing a mail with you. It's about female pale
Yes.
female to
Female pelvic pain.
pelvic pain. Yes, female pelvic pain. I think that that
I
is
will
also
urge,
very well trained.
yes,
Yes,
I will
ma'am.
urge you all to please join that group, FIPA. The name of that group is FIPA, that is Female Pelvic Pain Association. And we are actually doing a kind of initiative, the awareness initiative to spread the awareness among doctors regarding this ailment, which is actually neglected, female pelvic pain. And all specialties are welcome in this group, like a neurologist or a vascular surgeon, whosoever is involved in treating pelvic pain. So we will also urge you people to please join this group. And
Sure.
I can, we'll send you our coordinator number in mail, and you can distribute her number, and whosoever is interested can write to her directly, or you can write to me directly. My number is there. Then we can join. We can make you join that group. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think that will be the end of this. And finally, I'd like to ask our General Secretary NESOG, Dr. Chanda, to give a vote of thanks in short and end the webinar.
Thank you, Sandesh.
Thank you.
Dr. Amita Jain, pleasure meeting you on web, virtual meeting, and most welcome to be a part of NESOG. And great success, 2 good lectures, and looking forward to hear from you in different topics as you are associated with our NAMS. So it is a pleasure indeed. And thank you so much for giving your valuable times with such a short notice. Thank you once again. Thank you, organizers, Dr. Ganesh, Dr. Sandesh, Dr. Hira, and all the executive team. Thank you all the members who could participate today. It was an excellent participation from you all. The only thing I missed was the questions. Probably the lecture was too good, so people were very clear. Thank you so much.
Either thing. They are able to understand everything, or they are not able to understand anything.
We'll take it the other way. They are able to understand everything, because this is day-to-day problem everybody is facing in their OPD in hospital. So hopefully most of the things are clear, or maybe we'll talk later once you are again with us in near future. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
At the same time, I'd like to thank Mr. Dipesh, Asian Pharmaceuticals, and whole team giving such a good platform for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you. We are always with you, always with the doctors.
Thank you.
Very good paternity. Dr. Sandesh, should we end or?
We have some hands raised. I think how can we manage the? I think there are some queries. How do we manage this?
We can let them to talk. Should we do it? Should I do it?
Yeah, I think with
So
permission
from Dr. Neetu Singh, there's a hand raised. I'll allow her to talk, right? So
okay.
Now she can talk. Dr. Neetu Singh, are there?
No.
So another is Dr. Rajkishore Pandit. I'm allowing him to talk. His mic is also mute, so you can unmute yourself.
Dr. Kantu?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. It is very informative for us. Thank you, Amita Jain ma'am, and thank you, organizers. In day-to-day practice, such type of patient is coming, and we are very much confused which drug should we use or not, because we are not trained in urogynecology. So it is very informative and useful for me. Thank you for that, madam.
Thank you so much.
So there is Dr. Gyanendra Singh Karki is also here. Sir, please.
Hello,
Yes.
Dr. Amita and everybody. Hello, namaskar.
Namaskar.
So Amita, nice to see you.
Show me your face, sir. Why are you hiding your video?
Okay, I'm promoting him to panelist. Okay, he's now. We can see him.
Okay.
Sir, can you please open your camera, sir? Dr. Karki? Karki, sir?
You got muted.
Hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, we can see now.
Good. Yes, sir. Now it's
That's
good to
nice
see
to see
you.
you after a
How are
long
you
time.
doing, sir?
I'm absolutely fine because I had some problem in the morning, so I couldn't join in the time. But anyway, Amita is always awesome and excellent, and I
Yes.
hope you made a great presentation, right?
Thank you, sir. Thank you for
So-
your appreciating words.
So how you? How's
good,
Medanta? How's Delhi?
I'm today sitting Vedanta. I stopped my OPD in between, asked my coordinator, nobody will disturb me while I'm not opening my door. Still, I'm not opening my door. So now I have to see patients must be waiting outside.
I thought after our conference over, I thought I will go to see you people there,
Yes.
but
yes.
lockdown.
No problem, sir. You're always welcome. It will go by great God grace. It will go. I think soon it will
Yeah.
go.
So everything is fine. So great. Thank you. Thank you for delivering. No, I've been taking. I've been asking my juniors. So how was? They were so happy to hear you, right?
Thank you, sir.
So thank you, Amita. So shortly, COVID will over and we will come to see you in Delhi. Okay.
Most welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So there is another hand raised from Dr. Ananta Sarma. Can
Yes,
you please unmute yourself and speak?
yes, Dr. Sudesh. I'm Dr. Anand Sarma.
Yeah, Dr. Sharma, please.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Anand Sarma. So, Dr. Amita's presentation is very good. We really enjoyed. Very nice presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I think there's a final hand raised from Sanud Ali, ma'am. Ma'am, are you there?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Amita, welcome.
Yes,
we
yes,
have been,
yes, yes.
we have been,
We had already
yeah. Yeah.
shared our conversation was on mail only. I have never seen you. I have never heard you before.
Ma'am, you can open your camera. Yes, now. Sanu ma'am,
Hello.
unmute yourself, ma'am.
You have come on a very special day, Nesok's 31st birthday. This is our baby. And I welcome you from bottom of my heart. And as you have been telling me, let us have the FEP done soon. Now we have got all the dynamic, my younger colleagues active, Ganesh and Sandesh are in the role. So I'm sure we will be able to join you very soon. Thank you, Amita. Welcome. Welcome once more. Thank you, Sandesh.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Sandesh. Keep it up. The ball is rolling now. I'm very happy.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
That's my dream.
Well, I think with this, we should be ending our presentation now. There are no more questions now. Once again, thank you, ma'am. And thank you, everyone who have actively participated here. Thank you so much. And thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Namaste. Thank you all.
Thank you,
Namaste.
Amita. I saw you.
Thank
We
you,
wanted to
Amita.
talk in telephone, but we saw you today.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
God bless you.
Thank you.
Stay safe, all of us.
All right. Thank you all.
Hello.
Thank you all. Namaste.
Hello.
Bye.
Gyanendra, ठीक छ हैन? Gyanendra is fine. I'm happy to see you, Gyanendra.
Namaskar, Gare.
Namaste. I'm so happy to see you, Gyanendra, today, personally.
And I'm 10 times more happier to see you, ma'am.
किनभने अस्ति मेसेज मात्रै पठाएँ मैले तपाईलाई. I could not even give a direct call when you were in the
Thank you
hospital.
very much.
Look, but I'm glad you are
Thank you,
fine. It's so nice to see you, Gyanendra.
Namaste, ma'am.
Namaste, Hira. Congratulations. Very
Thank
nice
you for joining,
webinar.
ma'am.
एकदम राम्रो भयो नेसको 31st बर्थडे म्याम युरो गाइनोकोलोजी इज अल्सो रोलिङ होइन सन्डेस पहिले नि रोल गरिरहेछ नाउ इट विल रोल मोर एक्टिभ अमिताले पछाडि ल्याएकै तिम्रो युरो गाइनोकोलोजीलाई छिटो ल्याइदेऊ भनेर आई एम ग्ल्याड यु हेभ अल हियर टुडे थ्याङ्क यू भाइ गड ब्लेस यु ल ह्याप्पी नेसक डे लङ लिभ नेसक थ्याङ्क यू दिनेश
Okay, thank you.
Dinesh,
ma'am.
thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Like, thank you, ma'am.
So
Thank
should
you.
we end, sir? Ma'am?
Yes, I
हजुर।
guess.
ल
it's,
एन्ड गरेँ है त सबलाई बाई बाई अल
okay.
Bye.
Happy
Thank
Saturday.
you, everyone.
Thank you.
It was nice to meet you.